Welcome to the Writer Reads Jacob's Vision. This is part 2 of 3. My feet were frozen to the soil, but my mind was racing. I had to do what they wanted, or they were going to shoot me. I had to work out what they wanted, or I was dead. I didn't understand a word they were saying. I thought I was going to die until Jacob's voice echoed unbidden in my memory. When we find somebody, we always make them lie down before we go anywhere near them. And what if they don't? I'd asked. We shoot them, he'd replied. His calm factuality had been the source of our first argument. The guard raised his gun and barked the command again, bringing me abruptly back to reality. I let my knees buckle and dropped to the ground, wishing Jacob were with me. My hands I kept well out in front of my body. No sense of threat there. Jacob would have been proud. There were footsteps in the sand behind me. Then I felt the cold muzzle of someone's sidearm against the back of my neck, the weight of someone's knee in the middle of my back. Hands searched my clothes for weapons and found none, and words were exchanged over my head. Again, I didn't understand a word that was said. The gun left my back, and the guard stepped away. Again the voice spoke an order I did not understand. Slowly I raised my face to look. The order was repeated. I tried to gain a clue to its meaning from the guard's gesture. I could not, so I continued to stare up at him. With a sigh of impatience he slapped his pistol into its holster and took 2 strides toward me. I ducked my head as his hand descended and found myself lifted by my shirt collar to my feet. A curt bark at the watching guard seemed dismissive, and I watched them shoulder their rifles and march away. The guard with the voice moved his hand from my collar to my arm and led me toward one of the shower bays. Not certain of what to expect, but terrified by the possibilities, I shrank from it. The action resulted in my being pushed forward into the bay. While I recovered my balance, he turned on the water. I skipped back from under the spray, and he reached up and redirected the nozzle until I was soaked. Unable to escape it without taking a dive under the partition or pushing past him, neither a good option, I stood still. The water, though it smelt of chemicals, wasn't doing more than sting the grazes and cuts I'd suffered in my attempt to reach the dome. Did he have some sort of wet clothes fetish, or did I need decontaminating? I couldn't tell, but the water was luxury after months of going without. Cautiously, I began to rinse some of the dirt from my skin and rub at the grime on what remained of my clothes. The guard relinquished his grip on the nozzle, seeming content to wait until I'd finished. When I felt as clean as I was going to get without stripping off and changing into another set of clothes, I stood under the water and waited. The water was turned off, and the guard's hand was on my arm as soon as I was clear. Again he said something to me, and I sighed. Français, English, Galbas, Deutsch, I said, my voice trembling with the effects of the morning's breeze, my wet clothes, and uncertainty. He smiled then. English will do. We will, oops, you will walk with me. Very well, I said, looking up at the Guardian Towers. I will walk with you. He was, it seemed, in charge of security. I had stumbled on an inspection tour and shown the one flaw in security he'd failed to find. Whoopee for me. I accompanied him to a ground car parked beside the tower from which he'd come. Leaning through the passenger's door, he used the radio inside it to speak with the base commander. Again, I understood nothing of what he said, but I did notice there was no one standing outside the towers, and the gate was invitingly close. As he spoke, I began to sidle around the car. I heard, "Excuse me," then the crack of a pistol. The dust exploded at my feet, and I stopped. "Back here," he ordered, waving the pistol in my direction. I shuffled back to his side. He bade me sit and pointed to the dirt at his feet. I obeyed, the pistol coming to rest at the base of my neck as I settled. I tried to ignore the dust that stuck to my still wet trousers. The conversation did not last long after that. I heard him agree with someone on the phone and hang up. "That was stupid," he said. I shrugged. He opened the back door. "Get in." Again I obeyed. He shut the door behind me and locked it. A driver materialized from one of the towers and opened the passenger door in front for him. He climbed in and sat. buckling his safety harness before turning to cover me with the pistol. I sat quietly while the driver took his place behind the wheel, then sat just as quietly through the long drive across the abandoned desert savannah to the security officer's main base. When we arrived, I waited until he opened my door and took my arm once more, then allowed him to guide me into a building made of brick and glass. We walked up a flight of stairs and through a room containing small desks and chairs. We educate our children here, he told me, but I have nowhere else, so you will behave. I sensed the current of warning in his matter-of-fact statement. He reminded me of Jacob, so I nodded. He led me through to an office where a lady in her mid-30s waited. Estelle will show you pictures. You will tell her what they are. I nodded, allowing him to seat me behind a desk. The woman Estelle showed the first picture. I looked at it and felt myself go pale. I knew this picture. What is it? The man demanded. I swallowed and let the words spill out. That is the cloud that follows a nuclear explosion. It is the cloud that was seen after Chariclea was destroyed. The picture was taken from the Hill of Remembrance, also known as the Hill of Peace. The statues at the foreground edge of the picture are those built in memory of those who died in the cross-galactic war that occurred earlier this century. I paused, looking uncertainly from the guard to the woman. They seemed to be waiting for something more. Raking through memories I'd tried hard to forget, I stumbled on. The radiation from this blast did not reach the hill. The hill was overrun and partially desecrated by Yogressians 3 days later. The forest below the hill was burned. I stopped as a hand descended onto my shoulder and looked up. The guard bent his face to mine. You are not a native of Keriklia. How do you know these things? I looked at the desk. It was true, I wasn't a native. I had been travelling when the war began. My own home was no more. The grip on my shoulder tightened. The question was repeated. How do you know? He growled. I had a friend. He had the same photo in his pocket. He told me. To my surprise, the pressure on my shoulder did not decrease. The guard's eyes seemed to gain an intensity they had not held before, and I trembled, feeling truly afraid. What was his name? I could see no harm in answering. Jacob. Now the guard crouched before me, both hands resting on my shoulders. Jacob Königsley. Captain Jacob Königsley. I nodded. Where is he? There was an eagerness in the man's eyes now, an eagerness and a hope I did not feel was my place to destroy. I turned my head away. He shook me. Where did you see him last? I saw him last on Griermark Ridge, overlooking Ranagan. How was he? My voice, when I answered, was as emotionless as I could manage. He was dead. Before the guard could ask me any more questions, we heard the sound of children's voices outside the door. The woman went to meet them. The man took me by the shoulder. This way, he ordered. I did not take my eyes from the door, or the children filing through it as he led me from the office, past the desks and chairs, and through another door on the other side of the room. That door led to another corridor, and he pushed me ahead of him. I turned, walking where he directed. Behind us the door opened once more, and the heavy-booted steps of soldiers followed. The man who led me turned his head to acknowledge them as we followed the corridor past 2 doors to a T-junction at its end. My guard steered me left, and the soldiers followed. The arms of the T were short. I opened a door at the end of the left arm and walked through. There was an office, judging by the desk with 1 chair behind and 2 chairs in front of it. I did as directed, and sat in front of the desk. One of the soldiers waited outside the room, but the other followed us in and closed the door behind us. My escort took his place in the seat opposite mine, the desktop lying between us. What were you doing in the compound? He asked. I was seeing what was there, I replied. It was not the best answer. Even as I finished speaking, I realized how impertinent I sounded. I cringed as he rose from his seat, his face red with temper. I tried to apologize. I did not mean that to sound so. He subsided, hand slowly lowering from the drawn-back position of his slap. I tried to explain what I meant. I was sent to see what you were doing, to see if you were the same as the others. Your people did not seem friendly with them. I was hoping to find shelter amongst you. Too late did I correct my mistake. His head came up from contemplating the desk, and I could sense the sudden interest of the soldier at the door. You said we, he told me. I looked down, avoiding his gaze. He reached a hand across the table and trapped one of mine beneath it. His grip tightened. Tell me, he ordered. There are a group of us, I said. We are seeking shelter. I stopped and felt my face go pale as cold fear rose with realization inside my chest. I wrenched my hand free and ran for the door. I have to warn them, I cried, forgetting Cone Hill and the secrecy of my friend's location. The slavers will begin hunting today. I have to go.